It's the movie the Trump campaign doesn't want you to see. It's called The Apprentice. It is in theaters today. Sebastian Stan is a young Donald Trump. Alonso, tell us about this film.
You have to be willing to do anything to anyone to win. You have a big ass. You got to work on that.
So yeah, this is a movie about how one of the worst people of the 20th century created one of the worst people of the 21st century. I'm talking about Roy Cohn, utter scumbag and one of just the most vile human beings ever to live, who was, of course, the mentor to Donald Trump and taught him everything he knows. And over the course of the film, we see Cohn's machinations and his tutoring, turning Trump into the monstrous mogul that he would become. They talk a lot about the 3 rules, which is attack, 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 deny everything, and always claim victory no matter what. And we can see how that has manifested itself in the politician that we know now. But we see Trump's rise in New York real estate. We see his relationship with Ivana, whom he courts and then treats very, very badly and violently, in fact, once they get married. And we see the sort of Shakespearean reversal in which when Cohn actually needs something from Trump for once, the monster he has created is not going to get him what he wants. It is really powerful and a movie. This is a story that you pretty much think you know, and you may know certain aspects of it, but the way that Ali Abbasi and screenwriter Gabriel Sherman tell it, it really gives this kind of literally Shakespearean, I think, kind of tone. There is kind of a King Lear. There's kind of a, aspect to this. And you come to see how somebody who starts out as aggressively mediocre and trying to impress his father and trying to be a big deal in the world transforms himself into a successful failure, somebody who isn't necessarily good at anything, but he knows how to browbeat everybody around him into thinking that he is, and how to insist that he has triumphed even when he hasn't. And I think it is an essential reminder of who this guy is and why he is the absolute last person who needs to become president of the United States for a second time.
I wish it were as powerful as you viewed it as being.
Oh, wow.
I think the first half of it works. In the 70s, it works when he is just, as you put it, aggressively mediocre, and he just wants his dad's approval. And he's not really particularly good at anything. It's very amusing to see young Donald Trump knocking on doors of these shitty apartment complexes and trying to get rent money out of people who throw things at him and scream at him. That's very satisfying. I enjoyed that a lot. And just to see who he thought he was back then, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting exploration of this character. But then it jumps ahead to the 80s, where he more closely resembles the person that we would know him to become, right? Where he is, considered this, he's married, but he's considered ladies' man, desirable. He is constantly creating fodder for the tabloids. And I feel like once he is fully formed as the Trump that we know, it's way less interesting because it reveals just how empty this person is, and that all he is greed and ambition and just
vanity,
this vanity and just this unchecked desire for power.
Yeah.
More interesting to me is Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn. Sebastian Stan is good as Trump,
yes,
I think.
But Jeremy Strong is the MVP here, for no question.
Jeremy Strong's amazing here because there's a wiry intensity to him and a loathsomeness to him and a monstrous quality. But he's so good that maybe you almost feel the teensy bit bad for him toward the end. I'm not saying I did, but I'm saying that he is persuasive enough when he is at his lowest and most pathetic and groveling here. But it's just, they're all awful people. So.
Roy Cohn has been a really great character for actors to sink their teeth into, whether it's James Woods in the HBO movie Citizen Cone or Al Pacino in Angels in America, whoever played him on Fellow Travelers.
Fellow Travelers, yeah.
But Jeremy Strong makes such a meal of this character, and I as somebody who has not watched Succession. I'm not as familiar with his more recent work, but man, he is just nailing it here, and he is so completely loathsome, but like so assured of his own, patriotism and nobility, even though he is just a self-serving rat. I couldn't get enough of him. And so to see how all of that stuff bleeds into somebody who is more palatable for for public consumption, like Donald Trump, somebody who was like reasonably attractive and heterosexual and like good on camera, and you sort of see this kind of succession, if you will, of evil, as it takes place. I also like the way that the movie, the look of the film changed. The cinematographer is Casper Tuxen, and the 70s gritty LA or gritty New York has that kind of like Taxi Driver feel to it, and then it gets this sort of like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous sheen once we get into the 80s. Just the visual quality of the film, I think they do that subtly but really effectively.
I like that too. And like all of the hair and the costume design, the production design, like the tackiness of, where Trump lives with Ivana in the 80s, just like all of that hilarious scene where like neither of them knows how to parent Don Jr. I mean, just very, very funny stuff. There's definitely, we are looking at through the lens of the present day, looking back on him through the lens of the present day in terms of giving us certain hand gestures, certain like the way that Sebastian Stan holds his mouth, certain phrases, in terms of huge or bigly or whatever it is, like we're getting little drips and drabs, and it's almost triggering, like having to be with this person for a couple of hours. Like, I don't want to be with this person for a couple of hours, but when he's not fully formed in the 70s, not that there's ever hope for him.
Sure.
But he seems vaguely more complicated than the person we now know him to be. Maria Bakalova is also very good, I think, also as Ivana. Yeah. And trying to make it clear that there's, more ambition and drive to this person and more of a desire for an identity than what she was afforded in the press at the time.
Yeah, for sure. And how much she was contributed to his rise. And I think the stuff that we recognize of Trump now was there in Trump of the 80s. It just hadn't become as, we hadn't seen it as often. I also like Charlie Carrick as his brother Freddie, who has a rather tragic arc in the film. And that was an aspect of Trump's backstory that I didn't know about.
The reason he doesn't drink at all is because he's so disgusted by his brother.
Right, but just also like the way that he treats his brother and how that all resolves itself. Like, it scans, it's of a piece with everything else we know about this guy.
Yeah, no, Jeremy Strong is very committed, very intense. And the guy who played him in Fellow Travelers is named Will Brill. He was very good too. But like Jeremy Strong is like, he's a monster, but you can't stop watching him.
Yeah.
Whereas Sebastian Stan as Trump, like, I don't need any more of that. I enjoy Sebastian Stan as an actor. And he was great in A Different Man. And this is a great example of the kind of choice that he makes with his great looks and with his fame. Like, he makes challenging stuff. Like, no one wanted to distribute this film. There was a whole backstory about how nobody wanted to pick it up. There was concern that, like, what if Trump wins again? Will he come after us?
Exactly.
That is a well-founded concern that might happen, but it's a smaller distributor who's putting it out.
Yeah, Briarcliff is took up the mantle and is doing it. Incidentally, just in case this is just a content warning for people who like to know if this is something that's going to be happening. The film does include the Trump's sexual assault of Ivana, which she wrote about in her memoir. It is portrayed in the film, so if that's something that you have, a problem with seeing portrayed in a film, you should know going in.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. So what's your number then on The Apprentice?
I want to give this an 8. I was fascinated by it, even when it got into stuff that I was more familiar with, I still found it really riveting. And the two lead performances are dynamite, especially Jeremy Strong, though.
Yeah. I will say like a 5.3.
Okay.
And a lot of that is Jeremy Strong. And a lot of that is like the look of it and the production values of it. But again, maybe it's all too soon. Okay. Maybe. So The Apprentice is in theaters. Let us know if you see it and what you think.